Welcome, my dear ones. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we'll be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Chanelle shares with us her decision-making process when she decided to have her baby at home. Pushing beyond other people's opinions isn't always easy, and we discuss in detail the wisdom of women to know where they feel safest to give birth. She shares the importance of getting her mind to be okay should she need to transfer, and to surrender to the mystery of what lies ahead. Chanelle ends up with a long labour, and yet she uses her mindset to go into a trance state, maintaining her capacity to keep going. She goes into a state of timelessness, and the length of her labour does not worry her at all. She pushes her baby out, births the placenta, and has a perineum that is completely intact. A very straightforward, uncomplicated birth that all women should listen to remind us that birth can be this way, to counteract much of the fear surrounding the birth process. She also shares with us her mother beast awakening. So enjoy, dear ones, and allow her story to inspire you to open up your mind to what is possible. Welcome back, everyone. It's the Transform Your Birth podcast, and with me today is the lovely Chanelle. Hello, Chanelle, darling. How are you?
Tracy, good. How are you?
Thank you for deciding to share your beautiful home birth story with us today. How old's your bubby now?
She's 8 months. Just turned 8 months. Yeah.
Beautiful. So, Chanelle, you were pregnant. You decided to have a home birth. Can you tell us a bit about what led to that decision?
I did. Look, I was pretty adamant that I wanted to avoid any hospitals by any means necessary. If I had to go, then it was okay to. But I just wanted to be in my own environment, and have that control with the lighting, the music, and who was present at the time.
Yeah.
But I think it's just something that I resonated with, and it was from my chiropractor who threw it out as an option, and I just went sort of digging to find out a bit more information about it, and met with a few different people, even through the hospital, like the match nurses as well, just to get a feel and a vibe from those nurses, and then met with one of the midwives, and just compared how I felt with each of those two experiences, and it just felt right.
Yeah.
Just everything and even with my husband, like there were questions that we had, and again, questions like around, what if I wanted to go for a walk, or what if I wanted to have a shower? Like it was, and they were just happy to go with whatever we felt that felt right at the time.
Yeah.
Which is what I wanted, because I had no idea what to expect. And you keep hearing, go with what your body feels. And I guess it's something you can't prepare for real. Well, I say that, but then your classes were a good preparation as well.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that, but it's interesting how you intuitively knew who and where you felt like you explored a few different options, and you knew that this was definitely the right path for me. And what you're describing there is the midwife talking about, giving you the freedom. When we look at the models of care, we've sort of got up one end, we've got midwifery, and up the other end, we've got obstetric. And they're both great models of care, and they're different things for different people, But if you look at it as a spectrum, it's a bit like a continuum, actually, because in midwifery model of care, you've got the midwives in the public system, then you've got the continuity midwives, where they're the ones that follow you through the whole system, and they tend to be very woman-centered, so it's all about what the woman wants. And then you've got independent midwifery, which not only are they woman-centered, but they're also free of the constraints of a hospital system and the policies that they have for certain conditions. They still have professional expertise around safety and identifying risk, but they're not bound by policies that may or may not be relevant for the women that they're working with. And so they have a greater deal of freedom to be able to make choices around the care and the safety of the mother and the baby. It's still about safety. And when we look at the data and the stats related to home birth, the outcomes are very, very good. Lower levels of intervention, and the outcomes for babies and mothers are really good as well. So it's definitely an option worth considering. How did your partner feel about taking a walk on the wild side and going home birth? Was he on board?
He was definitely on board.
Yeah.
I think we were both on the same page. Oh, sorry.
What appealed to him? Why was he on the same page? Because sometimes women can experience a bit of resistance from their partners.
I think he was more happy to let me go with whatever I was comfortable with, because he knew if I was comfortable, then the whole sort of process was going to be sort of more, I guess, flowing and just sort of, yeah. I don't want to say easier, but if he knew that I was in the right state, then the whole process was going to take place in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he was definitely on board. It was, I mean, we definitely had a lot of resistance from family and friends that were hesitant, and they sort of tried to persuade us, that the hospital system is there for a reason. Why have it at home? Especially Dad, who's from I guess a developing country where sometimes hospitals are not even an option.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So he was very reluctant, but it just felt right, and everything that the midwives, I don't know, tick boxes, and it just felt,
yeah,
I don't know, just inside it just felt that this was the only option that I wanted to take.
yeah,
Yeah.
And I like how you've described that too, because too often we get in our heads about these things and we forget to feel. And there's an intelligence to the body and the system. Women tend to know where they feel the safest. And for some women, they feel safer at hospital. But for you, that was very different. But I want anybody listening today, it is a good idea to explore a few different options and to get a sense of how you feel about the way people talk to you, about the way that they're orientated. There's so many different approaches to childbirth. And, up the other end of the continuum I didn't talk about earlier is the obstetric model, which is run by doctors who are really, really good at being a safety net when women and babies get in trouble. And we're very fortunate to have them, but they are trained not necessarily to trust the process as much as to manage the process. That's how they're trained. That's how they're led to believe. And so for some women, that's where they feel safe, because they're happier for those people to take more responsibility for their care and their decision making. But you have to kind of, look at all those different options and just get a sense of where you fit in that sort of continuum. So you decided to have a home birth. You copped a bit of crap from the people around you. How did you manage that?
I think I was fortunate that hubby was on board, so he was soundboard, and I could just vent to him whenever. Look, I pushed back a lot.
Yeah.
And it did feel like a bit of a fight every now and again. And some days I was willing to do it, and some I just, let it go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
Because it did get a little bit tedious, especially toward the end, when I knew that that's what I was going to do. There was nothing sort of to change my mind. I think a lot of pushback and just sort of reminding them that my entire pregnancy I had no issues, that I felt fine, that there were no underlying health issues for Bub or myself.
Yeah.
And everything to date or to that point was smooth sailing. Like there was no concern for myself or baby. Even the midwives were fine with all the checkups prior. So
yeah, that's great. Now, choosing to have a home birth, you always have to explore the option of transferring if you need extra help. Did you explore that option, and how did you get your mind around that, given that we can get very invested in the idea of a home birth and wanting to stay at home?
Yeah. I think it wasn't until your birthing class, to be honest, where you said it's almost, you've got to be open to that. And so I did. I had this birthing plan prior to your class.
Yeah.
And then post the class, and it changed drastically, where the medical intervention was I had to be open-minded and accept that if needed, then that had to be there, or then I was okay with it if it got to that point. But it was more just to make sure that the midwives were also on board if there was that intervention, that they could be an advocate for what I was wanting.
Yeah.
Which they were happy with. And I just made sure that they were given a copy of this plan prior.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Which, again, I think it was just changing that mindset, really, that, if there was medical intervention by any means, there were preferences if it got to certain stages.
Yeah.
And I think it was just still to make sure that they were respected if it had to get to that point. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about your midwives.
Yeah, I don't know if am I allowed to mention them?
Sure. Mention
Yeah,
their
okay.
names. They might even be listening. Just mention their first names. Yep.
Yeah, so Mel, she runs her own, oh gosh, now I'm trying to, is it Care Midwifery?
Yeah, Care Midwifery. So
Yeah.
Mel Kelly.
Mel Pierce.
Mel Pierce.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I met with her the first time and just the vibe, I left the room feeling so energized, and like this power just felt, again, it just felt right. And I said I don't think we even left the office or the reception area, and I was like, yep, we're done, we're booked,
It was love at
we're
first
in.
sight.
Yeah. It just, everything she was saying, and I could see she had everything, like this wasn't her first rodeo type thing, and she knew what she was doing, and I knew that we were in good hands. And she had recently brought on a new midwife that had come from the hospital system. So that was, oh gosh, I've forgotten her name. It's just mind blank.
That's okay. It'll probably
come to me. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Chrissy.
Home birth midwives don't work on their own. They work in pairs. Typically, they have backup, and then they have backups to their backups often too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was good to meet prior to obviously the pregnancy, and I met with Chrissy leading up. So those few weeks, just just a check-in, and again, having those home visits was such a weight off the shoulders for me, not having to make appointments and parking and just those little first world problems, but they make a huge difference. And especially after having those home visits with Barb, because just leaving the house and there's just so much going on and you don't know what you're doing. And again, that was it. Yeah. It's great.
It's beautiful. And it makes it less clinical and more of a normal everyday event, which birth is. And yes, sometimes we need help, but, birth is something we've always done, and we've always given birth at home. So I think it's good for people to open their minds to seeing that as at least an option that they can explore if they want to.
Yeah.
So you made the decision then to have, actually, before I go further, tell me, what was the average length of your appointments with your home birth midwives?
Oh, gosh. I feel like the appointment itself, like we were actually talking about babies, and that was maybe 10 minutes, and the rest was like life questions and life stuff, and just personal and holidays, and just
getting to know you,
getting to know
the
each
relationship.
other. Exactly. Which again was a huge. It's important. You want to know who you're about to share everything and every body part with this person. That it wasn't just a stranger. Which again was another thing that I wanted to. If I couldn't get into this continuance, like with the hospital continuity program,
Yeah.
and I wanted to make sure that I did know who. I just didn't want to be another pregnant woman having another baby. I just, again, it's part of that clinical experience that I have with. It's not just the hospital; it could be, you know, your GPs and everything as well. So, yeah.
No, it's interesting, and I think it's worth knowing. I mean, we have medicalised birth, and the good thing about that is we've learned how to protect mothers and babies, and that's wonderful when things get really hairy and scary. That's a good thing. But really, we have to be reminded that birth is not a medical event. It's a normal, physiological, everyday event. But we're very good at pathologizing birth and parenting and newborn babies and all of those things. So when you choose to have a home birth, you're creating the conditions that actually really do work with the physiological process of birth. And it's what we call, or Sarah Buckley calls, uses the term undisturbed birth and unobserved birth as well, where we're not sort of under the eyes of people walking in and out of our room. We've got relationships with our carers and we're doing it at home. So it does create beautiful conditions for the physiology of labour to be optimised. Okay, so you'd made the decision to have a home birth. You decided that you needed to do some prep. You came along to my course, the Transformative Birth course. How were you feeling prior to coming in, and what sort of shifts did you experience in that course to prepare you for a home birth?
So prior, I thought 2 days, holy moly. That was my initial thought.
Most birth doesn't even go for 2 days, Chanelle. How am I going to bloody put up with 2 days talking about childbirth?
Do you know what? They went so quick, and what a huge amount of information to just absorb. And I reckon you could have stayed a whole week and you would still have not all the information, or not. I wouldn't say not prepared, but because it really opens your mind about listening, like you said, listening to your body. I think as much as I had this idea that you could be in control or try and timing and everything else, is just, I mean, it's literally out of your hands and you just have to go with the flow.
Yeah.
The biggest thing with your meditation, the recordings.
Yeah.
I remember doing those at home, and I mean, I think I was probably 34 weeks when I was doing your course.
Mm-hmm.
But I used to get home and just put them on. Most of the time I would fall asleep. Your voice is very, very soothing. But it also put me into this state where I'm not sure I've meditated like that or that powerful ever. And it was normally I find it quite hard to shut my brain off. But I could quite easily, which I think helped leading up to the actual birth.
Yeah.
But even hubby, so he's got kids with a previous marriage, and he too found a heap of information in those sessions that were useful for him. So yeah, I had changed my birth plan, or even just shifted my mindset as well to be accepting if medical intervention needed to happen.
Yeah.
If we needed to, be rushed to hospital for whatever reason. But it was also just prepping ourselves. So knowing what my partner's role was, and it was great for him to learn what he too had a just as important role to play as I did.
Yeah.
And that was great to actually hear it, for him to hear it from someone else rather than me sort of, dictating what he should and shouldn't do.
Yeah.
But yeah, gave him that power, I think, as to what his role was on the day or leading up. And then I think it also just a few things like I say it was empowering to know that I could say no if I needed to. Again, not just medical intervention, but also family.
Yeah.
Also being able to just say to family, not now, or, it's just us in the house. And just sort of being able to have those difficult conversations. I I don't want to underestimate that, because they can be really awkward, and you're going to push, ruffle feathers, and push potentially buttons, and create issues elsewhere. But it is important, because if I wasn't, and again, something that you taught was, if you're not in that right mind frame, then you're potentially putting blockers and interrupting the process, or the birth process, which again I value, and I think I did do. We can go into that, but I think it's important that to learn and just hear about those sorts of things from your class.
So it sounds like the practices you really embrace those. And I do talk so much about the power of the practices. It's the information's one thing, and you can get information anywhere. Understanding's another level, but actually brainwashing yourself into believing in yourself is a whole other level again, because that doesn't just change your thinking, it changes the way you labor. You actually respond differently to your labor when you really lock in a sense of understanding and playing through your mind and working with your mind to really hold that unshakable, undeniable belief in yourself that you can do it. And so I often talk about the practices working on 3 levels. One, they help you to go into deeper and deeper states of relaxation, which is the path of least resistance, where you're working so deep within yourself, where there's no tension, no resistance to what it is that you're experiencing. You welcome those sensations, you see them as one step closer to meeting your baby. The second thing they do is they brainwash you into believing in yourself. So you're hearing these messages all the time. I can do this. My body was made to do this. And there's a whole lot of powerful suggestions that people have learned the truth behind, that it's not just life according to Tracy. I'm not trying to brainwash people. I'm just helping them to understand their own power. And they hear it over and over again, to the point where it becomes the operating system. It becomes how you think and how you respond to labor. And then the third thing is it brings up any conflicting beliefs that you might have from your past. So it actually can create what we call a healing or a change response in your actual programming, your subconscious program about you believing in yourself and being able to respond to your labor and work with birth, not against it. So Chanelle's sort of describing there this process of change, of working with those practices, learning to push back against people, saying no, and trusting your own inner wisdom and following your own path, to knowing really clearly through your birth preferences sheet or your birth plan, and your partner knowing how important, in your case, his role were a whole lot of great ingredients to really support you to maximize the possibility of you being very successfully able to birth at home. So that's wonderful. When you think about those changes, Chanelle, what do you think you learnt that made the biggest difference on the day?
The biggest thing is probably to surrender in the moment. And that phrase that you've just said as well about the pain or the pressure is one step closer to meeting your baby. I had that repeatedly in my brain, especially, toward the end of the contractions and everything. That truly was something that really resonated with me the whole time. It just, it was huge.
That was the operating system. That was the mindset that you took into birth. Yeah. So that's wonderful. Thank you for going into those details. Simply, I like people to understand what it is that moves the needle in birth. And it's different for every woman. But when it comes to preparing for birth, there's a few things you want to make sure that you actually, really do work towards in being able to, improve your outcomes for both you and for Bubby. So tell us, Chanelle, what happened on the day? How did it unfold?
Yeah, so water broke on a Sunday afternoon on my way home from celebrating my dad's 70th birthday in the car. And we had nothing ready in the house. We didn't have car seat or anything, set up in as a just in case if we went to the hospital. So yes, everything just went into frantic mode and just fast forward everything. So we spent that night just shifting furniture. I had family come over and help shift furniture and just prepare because I had a bathing, like a birthing pool.
Yeah.
That I was hoping to have set up and everything. So look, the labor itself was quite a long period, but I again, this is where mindset, and I didn't realize till hindsight that the day after, all I could think of, and this sounds ridiculous, all I could think of is at the time is that my midwife likes her sugar, like sugar with her tea. I need to make sure that the midwife has tea while she's waiting around. So this Saturday, I was just shopping for sugar and random snacks for the midwife and making sure that she was comfortable when she was going to be over.
Very thoughtful of you.
But I had obviously put off my whole labor, to be honest. And it wasn't until that night I was like, what's happened? And then I thought, okay, everything that I need
is done.
Let's do this.
You were nesting, darling. You were nesting.
In a 24-hour period. So actually, that's when you went into my ears, and I had I dimmed all the lights in the house and just put myself into this zone. And it was on repeat, and the birthing, the recording, and just went into this state of, and I think it was a state of trance where I was just wasn't really conscious. No one, I did such a bizarre state. But I just let my body do its thing, and whatever was happening in the background, hubby was looking after, the midwife was, they did their thing. And I was just, preparing to birth this baby.
So what were you doing when you had the sensations? What sort of things were in your mind?
Yeah, so look, I was moving locations around the house. So it was from the bedroom to the ball, like the I don't know, the Swiss ball.
Yeah.
The shower, the birthing. I went out to the backyard with the dogs and fresh air, and just changing locations, rocking some of the movements with the towel, just to sort of shift and relieve that pressure when I could, and had my partner push on my hips.
Yeah.
Sorry?
The hip squeeze?
Hip squeeze, yeah. Just a variety of movements and different locations around the house. Toward the end of it, so it was 2.5 days of labor, bringing it on and everything. That I definitely slept in between contractions as well. Toward the end, I was just exhausted.
Yeah.
But I could. That's the thing. I was also so relaxed that I was genuinely falling asleep in between. Then.
So can I just come in there? 2.5 days. She drops the 2.5 days in. People listening are probably thinking, oh my God, 2.5 days. So that sounds like a long time. How did you manage your mind in that space? Did you ever start to come out and go, why is this taking so long? Did you ever get caught in the time trap?
No, not at all. It didn't even feel like a few hours. I didn't, because there was no concept of time or that this was taking too long.
And that's a very important point Chanelle's brought out. One of the things that will trip women up in labour is when they get caught in the idea of time. And the biggest challenge you have in labour is you don't know how long you're going to be in labour for. Now, Mother Nature's incredibly smart, and she says, oh, geez, those complex humans with their big fat brains, we need to help them with this. So she pops a little ingredient called timelessness into your endorphins. And so when you're maxing out on your endorphins, you go into an altered sense of time consciousness. And the thing that gets in the way of that is when people tell women that they've been in labor for 10 hours, or this is the time and the baby should be here, and why is it taking so long? And that'll absolutely hijack a mother's mindset, because she's vulnerable to those suggestions. But Chanelle was describing going into a trance, and a trance is a really interesting word to use, but it is an altered sense of consciousness. And what happens in labor is you come out of your cortex, your outer brain, and you go primal. You go into your more core mammalian brain, which has no sense of time. And so when women are able to stay in that part of their brain and they're not overstimulated and they don't have people planting ideas in their head or clocks in their face, they're able to continue to stay in that zone and they don't feel how long the time is. Is that what you experienced?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very powerful. Now, the people around her were probably absolutely shattered because they don't get the benefits of those performance-enhancing hormones. But bloody Chanelle, she's got the easy job. She's off into labour and she's just dealing with a few sensations every now and then. So that's really interesting. And you slept between the contractions, which would have helped you to stay, keep your energy levels up. So tell us about second stage, or when you started to transition into second stage. What was that like?
Again, it just look, it was just, I was ready to push. And again, it was something that I've heard many times. You'll know when you're ready, and I think, how do you know?
Yeah.
You know, you definitely know.
Yeah.
And
Can
at
you
that stage,
describe what you felt? Can you describe what that felt like?
Gosh, I just felt like I needed, like it was time. I don't know. I just felt like it was, now was she, like baby was ready to come out. I just needed to be, I felt I physically needed to get into a position that I knew was comfortable, which was again in the water. And because the water, like I had warm water, and I knew that I guess I just had this energy surge as well. And just,
that's the adrenaline. So women who've been able to not be too scared through their labors and overuse their adrenaline and keep adrenaline out of their system for the most part, when they come into second stage, which is the pushing stage of labor, they often get a big surge of adrenaline. They get this extra energy boost. And you experienced that, did you? Can you remember feeling that extra energy?
yeah, because I remember laying down at the time, and I said to my partner, I have to get up and I have to push. And at this stage, it was 2.5 days, and I was laying in bed and I was sleeping, and then all of a sudden I was like, I've got to get up and I've got to like, we're ready. Yeah, she's coming out. So we walked to the birthing pool and hopped in, and even the birth itself was not long at all. It's, again, concept of time is, but it was maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, if that.
Yeah.
But I was ready, and I remember saying to was on my knees, and I remember saying to the midwife, get ready, like this
there.
baby's coming, get ready now. And again, because it was quite a quick onset, and the midwife was rushing to get herself in position and everything. And I just had to push, but it was a slow, I knew I had to concentrate. You were still in my ears, and I still had to concentrate on my breathing, because I was very mindful of just pushing for the sake of pushing, and not rushing the process. So it came in a two-part push session of, I don't even know what to call it, but yeah, she and then she came out.
And what was that like, Chanelle, meeting her for the first time?
Oh, it was amazing. Do you know, and I didn't, at the time, we didn't know what we were having gender-wise. And it was probably, again, time, maybe half an hour after I'd given birth, I was like, oh, what did we have? I didn't even check. Like, it wasn't even a thing. I was just happy that this baby was now out, and like you said, this I got to actually finally meet this baby that
Oh,
you feel months prior, and you're excited, and you don't know what you're having, and then here she was, and
wow.
yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. And I loved that my partner could be there and be part of the birth, and he was the one that cut the umbilical cord, and yeah, it was just really beautiful, beautiful experience, and something that I want to share and see if the home birth is something that people
Mm.
can consider, and there
Mm.
are options, and
Yeah.
yeah,
So you had her in the water?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. And so tell me what happened. How do you then go from her being born and placed on you? Did you have your placenta in the water or did you get out?
No, I got out at that time. So we stayed in the water for maybe half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I just sat in the water. It was again endorphins. I didn't feel like time is really funny. I tell you, I have no. It could have been less, but I had her in the water, and we shifted from the pool to the bedroom. And then the second midwife didn't even have time to arrive before I had given birth. So by the time I did have her, and we were cleaning up, that she had arrived. So then the midwives did their weighing and checking and everything else. And I gave the placenta. I gave birth to the placenta in the bathroom.
Yeah.
I think, and that was a very, yes, I guess another unusual experience where, you physically are having to birth this thing where you don't. Again, movies don't portray this at all,
No,
and
they don't. No.
no,
Never see a placenta in a movie.
never.
But the beautiful thing is they don't have bones. So it's like
True.
birthing a piece of jelly.
This is true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But other than that, and then that came. It was relatively quick as well, and just
Mm.
went to bed and got to lay with this new precious gift, and it was beautiful. I wouldn't change it for the world.
Wow, that's lovely. Ah, what did you learn about yourself?
Look, I think um the biggest thing is, that I was able to listen to my body,
Mm.
which is something probably I don't normally do. I guess you sort of push through, and I can be quite headstrong.
Mm.
um I think I do like the fact that I came around to, if I needed to have medical intervention, that was also an option that I was okay with.
Yeah,
Because prior to the birthing classes, I was so adamant, to a point where it was probably stubborn.
yeah, yeah.
That if I did need to, in that mindset, I think it probably would have had
Mm.
quite a negative
Yeah,
impact on me.
yeah. It's an
Yeah,
important thing. You know, when I work with home birth families, it's an area I always go about transferring, because I have a belief that when we get very fixated on things like I'm going to birth at home, I'm going to birth at home, I'm going to birth at home, and I'm not going to hospital, I'm not going to hospital, and we fear going to hospital, we fuel what we fear. And so when we have those fixed mindsets, we're more likely to attract the need to go to hospital. So when I work with home birth families, my goal is to get them to be okay if they need to go to hospital, because otherwise they can be completely hijacked. Their birth can be completely hijacked by the fact that they're so fixated, and even though they need help, they can actually get in the way of that transition or to the hospital. But my theory is if they learn to accept that as a possibility, they're less likely to go. Yeah, it's
ironic.
kind of, I think it is ironic, which is why it's not about, if I think about going to hospital, I'll end up going to hospital. It's more a case of, no, you've got to have an open mindset, and you've got to be, your subconscious particularly has to be really clear to know how to be under all circumstances. So if I birth at home, what I've got to do, if I need to transfer, what I've got to do, and what my job is and what my partner's job is, and the role of the midwives in that transition to hospital. So it's an important part that anybody exploring home birth create a game plan about, if you do need to transfer, this is how we're going to manage that. And that's what I'm sure a lot of your conversations with lovely Mel and Chrissy and your midwives were about, how that plays out and what their role is and how that goes. Did you have those conversations?
We did, yeah, because they were, and again, that was pretty early on, as to what they could and couldn't do. Because they too, once you're in the system or in the hospital, that they too are bound by certain parameters. Which were great to know.
It's an important thing to know and get your head around, because you sure as hell don't want to be surprised on the day.
Exactly.
And then get upset when your midwives can't be primary carers. When you need to get some help. So that's an interesting thing right there. So what would you share with a pregnant woman? What birth wisdom would you share?
Oh, gosh, I think the biggest one is to consider a home birth, to have that as a consideration, as another option. It was such a beautiful thing to be able to have, again, scented candles, the dimmer lights, or the fairy lights we had. I love that my dogs were present, and once the first cry, one of them's one of the dogs were howling, and it was beautiful.
Family affair.
At 1:30 in the morning, poor neighbours.
Hey, they didn't get a whiff of the placenta, did they? If they had smelled that, they would have gone crazy. Whoa.
Oh, God.
Dogs and placentas go very well together.
Far apart, those. No.
I love that you said that. I think it is. People do need to explore. I mean, part of the problem women have is that we've got so much noise around us, and people have got so many opinions about what we should and shouldn't do. And, the answers to you and me are inside of ourselves. And when people get quiet and they follow their own inclinations, their own inner guidance, their own inner compass, then they tend to make better decisions, because there's an intelligence to our system, to our nervous system, our body systems, and our being. And we do know, women do typically know where they feel safe to give birth. And it's very easy to hijack women's sense of what it is that they want, and feel directed towards or attracted to, when other people tend to overlay their opinions over the top. When we chose to have our home birth, my mother-in-law, when I told her, classic quote, she said, "Well, darling, if cows can do it, you can do it." That was her response to me. And I thought that was a great response. And this was a woman who grew up on a dairy farm and saw cows being born all the time. So she just didn't see birth as a big deal. But then a lot of other people have a lot of fear around birth. So if you are going down the home birth path, it's not always wise to tell people that you're actually going to do that, because you can invite other people's projections of fear on top of you. And I when we made that decision, I was very careful about who I told and who I didn't. You can tell them after, then they can't, they can't say, "Oh, it's dangerous," and you've had the baby, and they say, "Well, yeah, it's born at home," and that's a wonderful story. But we do tend to project fear onto women when they're making those decisions, which isn't actually helpful. I'll tell you another story, which is another example of this. I worked with a woman once who was having her 5th baby, and she had had 4 very straightforward births. A couple of the first ones were very long, all in the birth centre, 2 in New Zealand. She was at the birth centre in New Zealand, and then 2 here at the birth centre. And she'd had pretty good experiences for the most part. And when she was pregnant with number 5, she said to me, I don't think I want to birth this baby at the birth centre. I'm going to look at other options. And I was a bit confused because I thought the birth centre gives you continuity. It's kind of gold class treatment, really, because you have a relationship with your carer who's going to be with you all the way through. And I was a bit confused why she wouldn't go down that path again. And she was talking to another friend of ours who'd been to an obstetrician. And she said, oh, you should try this obstetrician. So she got curious and she went and had a chat to the obstetrician. And she decided then and there she was going to have an obstetrician for her 5th birth. And when she told me, I was really surprised because it was so different to what she'd done with her first 4 kids. And what was so interesting is 2 weeks after signing up to the obstetrician, they found out that the baby was going to require surgery 24 hours after being born. And that obstetrician was the absolute perfect person for them to have seen, who could then set them up with the right surgeons and the paediatricians and the people that she needed to see. So on some level, she knew that this was going to be the path for her. And I love that story because it's an example. When women follow those inclinations, they tend to make the best decisions without even knowing why they're making those decisions consciously. It's coming from a much deeper intelligence and a much deeper wisdom inside her system. So I also love, Chanelle, how you also talked about your ability to say no to other people. Can you tell me more about that? What sort of a beast did you become?
Oh, do you know, I really did. I really did become this, because I was just, not only was I over this, because I don't think we had anyone positive or anyone supportive. It was all,
Wow.
I mean, initially it was shock, but then a lot of, because we've got a lot of medical family members that are part of the medical industry, and they,
Yeah.
again, quite adamant and telling me all the risks involved and all these, hypothetical scenarios that they were pulling from thin air. That, but again, I guess I felt fine. Like, it just, I knew that it was the right option. But yes, so I definitely became a beast, and even my partner, I would just give him the look and be like, just brace yourself because it's about to be unleashed again. And I used to just throw out like a lot of facts around home births and this, professional midwives, and
Yeah.
and that if I need to, there is also ambulance cover if need be. So
Yeah.
it's not that we were just going to be left high and dry at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so it's, but yes, I think the classes gave us, again, the birthing classes gave me that confidence to be able to say, actually, no, I'm okay with it. You might not be okay, and it might not be something for you, and never will be, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
But yeah, for us it was, or for me it was my option. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the inner beast, the mother beast, is quite a handy person to tap into, because when that baby's born, you're going to need her.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
it's not only about advocating for ourselves in the pregnancy, that continues. That's a lifelong journey right there. Our children need us to be advocates. Our children need us to be able to say no to people when something doesn't feel right. And you might as well get on board with that beast while you can, because she's there to protect that baby. And she's got a big fat amygdala in her brain, which means that she's very hypervigilant about protecting that baby. And so it makes sense that there's a wisdom to the system in order to do that, to protect the baby. And for you, protecting that baby and that birth was about having your baby at home. For somebody else, it might be with an obstetrician or in a hospital, whatever. It's listening to the system of the woman. Well, Chanelle, that's a beautiful story to share with us all today. And it's an inspiring story because it highlights how undisturbed birth can lead to birth unfolding in its physiological optimal state, and tends to lead to better outcomes for mothers and babies when we can maximize that hormonal release and a woman's mindset and her physiological response to birth can go a long way in supporting the safety of the mother and the baby. And Chanelle's story really, really highlights that today. So it is something worth exploring for those of you who are interested, and for other people it won't be right for you. But the story of Chanelle's birth also can give us a lot of great information about how to go into a trance state, the role of time and moving into timelessness, being able to sleep between contractions and really optimize her hormonal response, getting a beautiful big surge of adrenaline right at the end when she needed to push a baby out, her real clarity in knowing that she needed to push her baby out, and how she was able to respond to changing the position her body was in. She was lying down to, no, I've got to get up, I've got to push this baby out. She was able to follow her own inclinations and her body's wisdom to bring her daughter here safely. So a beautiful, inspiring birth for you all to hear. Is there anything else you want to say, Chanelle, before we clock off?
No, I think we've covered, just follow your inner self and listen to it. It knows what it's doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I suspect that sets you up pretty well for parenting, yes? But that's what you have to do with your babies too, isn't it?
Still getting a grip of that one.
Yeah. Me too, darling. And I'm 27 years in. I've been doing this gig for 27 years. And I'm still working out what's my inner wisdom tell me about a 27-year-old son right now who's really giving me the shits. It continues. It's a lifelong process. It's a life sentence. So thank you so much for listening to us today. And we will have another wonderful episode next week. So we'll see you again then. Bye for now. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Our Transform Your Birth course, both in Canberra and online, is waiting for you to feel calmer and more confident to give birth and change the way you labour. Or why not watch our free masterclass on Keeping Relaxed and Excited About Birth, where we discuss the 3 most important things that can change a birth. You'll find us at our website on www.transformparenting.com.au.